Well, welcome back everyone to another close reading video. Today we're reading Shakespeare's Sonnet 71, which is a very self-conscious sonnet. The speaker is imagining his own death, or the aftermath, really, of his own death. And there might also be something going on with the numeration here. There might be some significance with the number 71. Catherine Duncan Jones, for instance, has speculated that perhaps the speaker is thinking of his own death as the speaker in Sonnet 71 because the life expectancy was supposed to be around 70. No one really was imagined to live past that. So it could be that since this sonnet is a meditation on what happens after death, it could be that that's something significant with Sonnet 71. Maybe something there. Shakespeare does do this. We saw this in Sonnet 12 and says, when I do count the clock that tells the time. Of course, there's 12 hours on a clock's face. So could be something going on there, just something to keep in mind. So we're going to look at Sonnet 71. Let's read it first. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly sullen bell give warning to the world that I am fled from this vile world with vilest worms to dwell. Nay, if you read this line, remember not that hand that writ it, for I love you so that I and your sweet thoughts would be forgot, if thinking on me then should make you woe. Oh, if, I say, you look into this verse, when I, perhaps, compounded am with clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse, but let your love even with my life decay, lest the wise world should look into your moan, and mock you with me after I am gone. Structurally, something to note about this sonnet is that instead of having a pair of lines comprising a closed couplet, we have basically the sense beginning here in line 12. The sense overflows into line 13 and is then completed in line 14. Usually in Shakespeare's sonnet, the sonnet snap closed with a couplet, but here it doesn't do that, which gives it this unresolved sense or anxiety that I think is apparent in the speaker's language here. But let's begin with the first quatrain. The sense is pretty clear. No longer mourn for me when I am dead, then you shall hear the surly or unfriendly sullen bell give warning to the world that I am fled. Now, in those days when a person was buried or had died, the parish church would ring the bell to let the village know that someone in the village has died. So when this bell gives warning to the world that he is fled, gone where? Well, from this vile world to dwell with vilest worms. Now you see how this line has balance. Shakespeare loves balance of this kind. Vile world with vilest worms we have linked here with alliteration. Vile and vilest, the figure of polyptoton in the alliteration, which began with warning to the world, in this vile world pitted with vilest worms. And there's something sarcastic going on here. Typically when you speak of somebody's death, you think of them as a good person going to a better place. But here, instead of going from good to better, he's going from bad to worse. And notice how conversational it gets. He begins to address the reader. Perhaps the lover to whom this sonnet is addressed, but also perhaps to a public readership. The consciousness of the speaker here is sometimes gesturing towards a wider public readership, sometimes a private readership of just the beloved. But here, again, very conversational with irregular rhythms. Nay, if you read this line, remember not the hand that writ it, for I love you so that I and your sweet thoughts would be forgot. Let's just stop here. Now we notice in the previous sonnets, beginning with all the way back to Sonnet 15, that the speaker plays with the idea of poetry granting immortality to its subject. And we talked about how Shakespeare differs in this regard from his classical predecessors, Horace and Ovid. The classical poets believed that poetry would bring immortality to them. Well, here in this sonnet sequence, Shakespeare has played with that and changed it. So now that the poetry is giving immortality to its subject, the beloved object of the sonnets. But here, the speaker is finally being brought into this as not someone who will be remembered by the sonnets, but someone who actually will be forgotten. So instead of just being neutral, this is actually negative. He loves the beloved so that he would prefer the beloved forget him than to remember and be sad. So instead of saying, mourn for me when I am dead, he's saying, forget me, lest you also be sad. But notice too how this vowel, if thinking on me, then should make you woe, meaning mourn, or to cry, or to moan. And notice too how anxious he is here. All these ifs. If thinking on me, then should make you woe. Oh. And notice how that vowel, that sound is carried over into the next line. Oh, if I say, you look upon this verse, when I, perhaps, compounded am with clay, meaning his body being compounded with clay, turning back into clay, do not so much as my poor name rehearse or repeat. Again, this is where the direct address here is ambiguous. Private readership, public readership, does the speaker have in mind a wider audience for these poems, even though they're still addressed to a very private, personal individual? It's very possible. Again, this is how the sonnet is a little self-conscious. But let your love, even with my life, decay. Here again, that balance of your love and my life. But let your love, even with my life, decay, lest the wise world should look into your moan and mock you with me after I am gone. So before the world was vile, here it is wise. Wise not so much in the sense, I think, in this line, not so much in the sense of wisdom and knowledge. I think cunning, in a possibly negative connotation. The wise world should look into or inquire or ask questions about why you moan for me, lest, or unless they should, mock you with me after I am gone. Now this is interesting because the speaker was imagining basically he would be forgotten by the world, or at least his love. Whereas his love should forget him, the world, he expects, will mock him. And that if the beloved mourns and does not forget the speaker's death, then the world will mock him too, he's afraid. It's a very self-pitying sonnet, and I don't think we should totally take it too seriously. I do think that there's some playfulness going on here. Sonnet writers around this time used to love to portray themselves with self-deprecation. Sir Philip Sidney does this in the Astrophil and Stella sonnets, where he comes off as a kind of a fumbling poet. George Herbert, his lyrical eye is often as a humorous, bumbling figure. Of course, this has precedence all the way going back to Chaucer, who makes fun of himself in his own verse as well. But there's something going on here, I think, with the speaker being a little bit too melodramatic here in his plea that the beloved forget him. Another thing that could be going on here, just before we close, is that the speaker is maybe self-conscious, or picturing his own, or picturing the aftermath of his death and how no one remembers him. This could be as a self-defense way of saying, well, don't remember me anyway. So it's not like I wanted to be remembered. Possibly what's going on here, but again, I think one of the most interesting things about the sonnet is the ambiguity as to whom he's addressing. So that's Sonnet 71. There's certainly more to be said about it, but we're going to stop there. Until next time.